there. Welcome to the Pelvis Project podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Roxy. We're two pelvic health experts brought together by passion for our careers, entrepreneurship, motherhood, and the desire for intentional relationships.
Join us in our mission to spread pelvic floor awareness and start conversations surrounding the truth behind genuine health, imperfect wellness, and joyfully navigating life. We are so glad you are here with us.
Let's start the conversation.
Hello.
Hey, Megan. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, everybody. You're listening to this on a Wednesday. Let's start off with tell me something good.
There's been some nice warm days and there's been some not so lovely days, but I have very much enjoyed sitting on my porch swing after bedtime, after the kids go to bed, and having no mosquitoes attack me. And I'm just cherishing this time of warmer weather minus bugs that want to eat me alive.
That's right. That's right. Let's see. My tell me something good is actually pretty related to yours with the weather. We and the bugs. We got away for a little bit over spring break. It's really funny because the way that, my work schedule is, as far as like I work every day. Some days I see more patients than others. Essentially what I did is just shifted all my people to the end of the week. So really I only took off about 6 hours. So I was like, oh, I took some time off. And then I'm like, well, I didn't really, but it was great to get away. And we went to Dogwood Canyon, which is in Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
We go about once a year. My aunt and uncle have a place down there. And so it's easy to go to. It's close to their house. And going at this time was so amazing. And it was crazy because it was the weekend here leading into spring break where Saturday was really nice and then Sunday was like cold and crazy. And it was the same way down there. And just the whole time we were down there on that Saturday, I just kept saying like, we could go home tomorrow and this one day would have been totally worth like the drive down here because it was just so perfect and beautiful. And so we got there and we ate lunch at the restaurant and sat outside and then walked. And we got to a point where I knew that for like my body and I was coming off like some autoimmune flare stuff. And so I let the kids and Nathan go on and finish the walk because it goes into Arkansas. And I stayed with the dog and just found a spot under a tree and just sat in the grass and was there for like a good hour by myself, listened to the birds. But what did get me up was I closed my eyes. It felt so good. And I felt something on my leg and I opened my eyes and it was a good old tick crawling on my leg. And I'm like, nah, okay, get up, brushing myself off. So then I was paranoid that ticks on me, but I was shocked that we also found a seed tick on Owen and 2 seed ticks on the dog. And so for it to be so early, but I know it's been nice, but they were out, let me tell you. So anyway, that was my tell me something good, and we could have a little podcast on Dogwood Canyon. So good. Highly recommend it.
That's good. Okay. You want me to start us off?
Start us off. What are we talking about tonight?
We are talking about constipation in kids. Buckle up, everybody. It's going to be good.
Buckle up.
This is, as pelvic floor therapist, we're treating bowel dysfunction in adults, but it's very common in kids. We see this also in our pediatric population, and it's very common.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take much. I'm sure if anyone's a parent here, they know, especially with like babies or little kids, man, a kid gets just barely dehydrated or you give them some random food or just the littlest thing can throw that off. And so it can be really frustrating and confusing because then to try to get them out of this rhythm feels very exhausting or uncertain or just like, what are we doing here, right? And so a couple things to really get us going before we dive into this. We want to reassure you that this is usually not a behavior problem, especially initially. Your child isn't out to get you. They're not trying to be bad. They're not just rearing their head emotionally. Usually there's a physiological problem that starts all this. It starts the ball rolling in the wrong direction. And it's usually like a body mechanic and pelvic floor component. And so as pelvic floor therapists, we want to address this today in this episode and help you with this takeaway that pooping is a coordination skill and it's not just about digestion. And so there's a lot of mechanical strategies and different modifications that we can make from either a pelvic floor therapist standpoint and or just as parents, we can be teaching other people to be doing this with their kiddos. And so, Megan, any other thoughts on that?
No, yeah, I was just going to say that this is really common. We hear this a lot, but what we do hear a lot is, "Oh, yeah, that can happen. They'll grow out of it." And we are here it's kind of like what's told to adults about like with urination, like, "Oh, yeah, that happens." Like it just is what it is. And nothing drives me more crazy than, if I hear things about like, family members or friends and their kids are struggling to have bowel movements and it's like all they're told is take some Miralax and call it a day. And it can be more than that because we'll talk about this more in depth here. But all it takes is one painful bowel movement for a kiddo. And now we have this fear that is laid down. And so, again, we've got this whole nervous system thing that gets wrapped up into it. So, let's talk about like what counts as chronic constipation. So, signs that parents may notice is less than 3 bowel movements per week, hard or painful stools, large stools, stool withholding, so they're just holding it all day, accidents or encopresis, and then belly pain, bloating, or decreased appetite. Those all might be some signs. And so pelvic floor insight on that is to poop, 3 things must happen together. So the colon pushes the stool down. The abdominal pressure helps move the stool. The pelvic floor muscles have to relax. That's a big one. And if the pelvic floor tightens instead of relaxing, the stool can get stuck. So this is sometimes called dysenergic defecation. That's kind of like the simple explanation. And that, let me tell you, happens in adults too, but this happens in children as well. And so it's something to keep in mind that it might be something more going on than just they don't want to go poop. It might be that they're trying to, but the pelvic floor is contracting when it should be relaxing, and now it's causing pain and different symptoms to happen. And the other thing is, it really is important that you pay attention to your kids' bowel movements. Once they start having a little bit more independence, it's easy to just, they go in and go to the bathroom and you don't really look. But it is important to just keep tabs on it, especially if you're starting to notice some, different like streaks in their underwear or their belly hurts or even like some behavioral stuff. It might be worth like paying attention to their bowels. So,
Well, and even further with that, I know sometimes with my kiddos being in daycare too,
yeah,
it can all of a sudden I can think, actually, if someone asked me, when was the last time a kid pooped?
yeah,
It could be a minute because if they're pooping during the day when they're at daycare, right? And so I think that's just another kind of sidebar to maybe keep tabs on, maybe asking when kids get a little older or just being in good communication, obviously with daycare, what the consistency is looking like or what the regularity is there. So Megan hinted at this earlier of that painful bowel movement maybe starts that out. And that's what we kind of want to jump into. How does this happen? So she just listed the kind of the sequence of events here with what it takes to have a successful dump, right? Into the toilet or a diaper, I guess that could be it also. But how does this then happen? And so just from a really basic example, if we go back to that painful poop experience, so a little kid's going to have that experience where it hurts when the bowel is coming out, usually because it's hard and big from whatever change happened. And so what happens then, just like anything else when we are in pain, we're going to brace or we're going to tense up because we can anticipate that pain happening. And so the child's going to tighten their muscles up to try to hold it in because they're thinking, man, last time this hurt and I don't want this to hurt again. So they're going to tighten up harder. The stool's going to stay longer. And this is a huge problem because it becomes harder and larger. Not only does more accumulate, but the longer that our stool is in the large intestine and the rectal area there, the more fluid that gets pulled out of it. So it's not like the body says, oh, they didn't poop it out this time. We'll just hold on to it for a little bit. No, the large intestine continues to do its job, which is really
Yeah.
nice, but not nice if it gets holding
Yeah.
that poop in. It just gets harder and harder. And so then
Yeah.
we can imagine that that's going to be more painful the next time. And then we see this sticky wheel of this poor little kid is anticipating pain. They're holding, it gets harder. So then the next one, when it finally overflows, is very painful and large. And then it just affirms the fear that they were anticipating ahead of time. From a pelvic floor standpoint, then, is when these kiddos start to reflexively tighten their pelvic floor to prevent pain, then over time, the muscles actually forget how to relax during a bowel movement. And that's when this mechanical dysfunction starts to become then their new habit, and they don't actually, like us telling them to relax or just like what all the parents do, just, it's okay, you're just going to go poop. They're like, yeah, right, this hurts. And then the
Mhm.
muscles don't even remember how to do it correctly. And so we want to just think about when that bowel's coming, just as an analogy, maybe the pelvic floor is like a door that's staying shut when the body's trying to open it. Remember, Megan said that the pressure comes down from above. The colon's trying to move it out, the body's trying to move it out, but the pelvic floor closes that door if that reflexive tightening is happening. And so we can see just the tension that's happening within the body here. And so just thinking about these triggers and what kind of continues to trigger that is it can be stress from potty training. It can be busy school schedules or maybe busy summer schedules, whatever that looks like. It could be like the fear of public bathrooms or just unknown bathrooms that they're like, we don't want to go in there. That toilet's bigger and scarier than the one that's at home or
Mhm.
whatever. This is just maybe even exciting to be in like a different bathroom, and then all of a sudden they can't go. We also notice this happen with dietary shifts or like travel or illness. And so just recognizing it can be seemingly mundane, simple things that trigger this, but then the body starts to jump onto that and gets out of whack, and it quickly forgets how to do it the correct way.
Yeah. I'm like laughing because both of my kids are the ones that are, I mean, they have very regular bowel movements, but both of them are the ones that are like, I'm going to wait till I get home from school to go to the bathroom. I'm not pooping at school. And I always have to say, like, but you can. You will if you have to. We have lots of good discussions in our house about healthy pelvic floors. Yeah. So, signs parents often miss. So, kids are often actively holding stool, even if they say they don't need to go. So, that can happen. And that's what you got to be careful about is like, that's why you want to pay attention, see their stools and that sort of thing, because we'll get that, like, I don't need to go. I don't need to go. And they'll want to just keep playing. That's another thing is sometimes like they're playing and they don't want to stop, miss out. So, things parents may notice is standing on toes or like crossing legs, squatting in a corner, rocking or stiffening their body up, hiding when they need to poop, skid marks or accidents, like we talked about that. So, the pelvic floor insight on that, like these postures are often kids squeezing their pelvic floor to prevent stool from coming out. So you can imagine they're just like so tight because they can feel it. They don't want to. And then accidents, the encoparesis often means the rectum is overfilled and not that the child is lazy. So they aren't meaning to have bowel in their underwear or skid marks or anything like that. It's not that they're lazy, but when it becomes overfilled, especially what happens if you have bulking and stool sitting at the rectum for a long period of time, the rectal width, the diameter starts to get overstretched and overstretched. And so now you can get like looser stool come up behind the solid stool and it kind of seeps down around and now it seeps out of the rectum. And we see that happen quite a bit. And so with that, that's where, when we're doing an evaluation, we're talking about the stuff of we have to work on getting the bowels moving because we need to get the body back to recognizing that it's not being in this overstretched position for a very long period of time.
Okay, so we're gonna we've kind of talked about how it all goes wrong, but let's pause real quick here and maybe just talk about how is it supposed to work, so
Yeah.
that then we can bring that insight into some strategies on if you're a parent that is struggling with this. we want to give you some take homes, but let's think about this for a bowel movement. The pelvic floor, basically, it needs to lengthen and relax so that that sphincter can open. And when that bowel comes down, it just needs to relax and kind of move out of the way. And so the rectum then signals the brain that the stool is ready. And we all can relate to this. You can feel that kind of that urge or that pressure feeling of when a bowel is getting closer, we need to be having a bowel movement soon. So it triggers the brain there. And then the body is going to coordinate the breathing, the abdominal pressure, and the pelvic floor relaxation. And so when that pressure comes down, then the rectum's going to be moving that bowel closer to the opening in the pelvic floor, then is triggered to open and relax. When that doesn't happen, we already kind of emphasized on that, is it can be that either the pelvic floor is tight, where when the kids are supposed to be relaxing those muscles, those pelvic floor muscles are reflexively tightening. It can be poor coordination if there's been some instances of leakage or maybe there's been some pain. Then this sequence of events doesn't happen in the right timing and the right order even, or maybe to the right intensity. And then that triggers the bowel to not be able to fully come out. And also then like Megan talked about, those gripping and guarding patterns that we see kiddos fall into because they're afraid because it hurts. I think we all can appreciate that. We've all probably, I would think, had this experience with us where we have a bowel movement that just is a little bit too, it's just a little bit uncomfortable coming out. We know better and say, okay, we just got to get this out or whatever. But as a little kid, they don't understand that. And so that fear is a big motivator for that muscle guarding.
Yes, absolutely. So practical strategies that can help. A good toilet routine. So sit for 5 to 10 minutes after a meal and utilize the body's gastrocolic reflex. And so we don't want to have them sitting in there for half an hour. 5 to 10 minutes, go in, sit, try to go, get up, have them do something else, bring them back. Focus on practice, not pressure. So the pelvic floor cue is encourage slow belly breathing while sitting. And that's something that if you're working with a pelvic floor therapist, they're going to be working on with the child to teach them proper belly breathing to help while they're sitting on the toilet. And there's different tools that we can utilize as far as like bubbles go or different things, which that brings me to a story. I had this kiddo that was really constipated and I was so excited because I had gotten like bubbles and I was going to send him home with bubbles. I saw him for his first visit. He was like all excited and ready to go. And at the end, I was like, okay, well, I've got some bubbles and I'm going to send them home with you. And I want you to blow them while you're sitting on the potty. And this is going to help make you go poop. Well, he was terrified to poop. And he was like, oh, I don't want your bubbles. He did not want my bubbles because I said they were going to help him poop. Like after that, he was like, no way. So funny story on that. But
That's hilarious.
Anyway, position matters. So many kids try to poop with their feet dangling, and this makes it a lot harder. Imagine as an adult, if your feet aren't on the ground, you would feel so ungrounded to have a bowel movement. So a better setup is like feet are supported on the stool, knees are slightly higher than the hips, lean forward on the elbows or lean forward with the elbows on the knees. And this position helps the pelvic floor relax and lengthen, making stool easier to pass. So remember, these are little guys. So even a squatty potty may not be tall enough for their feet to hit. So you really have to get creative in figuring out how to have their feet on something. And they make all sorts of different like kid options. And I just highly, highly, highly recommend that. Even if your child doesn't have technically issues with constipation, they should be able to have their feet planted on something. So stool softeners. The goal is for like a soft, easy to pass stool. So helpful supports with that is hydration, fiber from foods, medication when recommended from the doctor, time for the colon to recover, that sort of thing. And even perfect muscle coordination won't work well if the stool's too hard to move. So often I think we get kind of caught up in thinking like, well, I want them to get past this without utilizing any sort of like stool softener or medication. But very much with this population, we typically have to get something going to soften the stools and utilize it for a very long period of time, actually, because we need the border of the rectum to come, like if they've been constipated a long period of time and it gets stretched, overstretched, we need the borders of the rectum to have time to come back down to normal size. And if we stop utilizing those softeners too quickly, then they get backed up again. And then it starts the whole sticky wheel over again. And so that's some of the hardest things is like, we'll finally get somebody to like be making all this progress. And it's like, okay, let's just stick to the plan now, like stick with this for months. And, they're like, oh, they're starting to do better. And parents, like, they just mean well, they're like, oh, I want to start getting them off of this. And so they start backing off. And then the bedwetting happens again, or they start leaking again. And so we have to like, we didn't do anything wrong. We just have to pull back to that utilization of that tool. And I mean, we've worked with, patients that I've seen with providers on a different mix of different like stool softeners and like little chocolate things with coconut oil and different ways to like cause really have to get to it. Might be like suppositories or something like that.
Okay, let's address then. Next, I want to chat a little bit about how just emotional this can become because it can be frustrating. It can be fearful. The parents can feel kind of hopeless. The kid feels pressure, whatever. There's just a lot. There can become a lot of emotion wrapped up into this. And anytime that happens, then the nervous system increases. And if you know, Megan and I have been listening to anything we've talked about in the recent history, kind of where we're at on trying to help regulate the nervous system and how important that is to a pelvic floor standpoint. And so when kids are associating pooping with pain or stress, then their nervous system is going to increase, and that fuels this whole dysfunctional cycle. So helpful strategies. And I know we say this, but if you've been in the thick of this, you're definitely going to relate to this as a parent. But we really want to avoid punishment or pressure on these kiddos. We know the truth. We know there might be some discomfort. We just got to get through it. But we want to really avoid that pressure on them because they're already feeling the nervousness of anticipation of pain or whatever. Also using neutral language. So we don't want to be super bribey. We also don't want to be condemning and just being really matter of fact. We want to pull as much emotion out of this. At the end of the day, we want to be able to just go have a poop and it not have really any emotion tied to it. It should just be a neutral fact of life. But for these kiddos, there's a lot of anticipation around it. And so the more neutral we can remain, the better we can help them regulate and pull away from the emotion that comes with a bowel movement. And then another thing we can do is to really celebrate the effort or the intention or the attempts rather than the outcome. And so that starts to feed into a kid thinking maybe they're going to be in trouble if they don't have this bowel movement because there's so much hype around it, or they were unsuccessful in passing that bowel. Rather to say, like Megan had talked about, just going and sitting for 5 or 10 minutes and say, great job. Like, I know this isn't fun, but, we're trying to remind your body how to do this. And, celebrating that even if there's not an actual bowel outcome on that. And so really thinking about the take home with this idea is that when kids are anxious, the nervous system is going to naturally tighten the pelvic floor muscles. We go back to that analogy, it just shuts the door and the body fights itself. And so we want to help kids feel safe so that helps their muscles relax too.
Yeah, absolutely. So when professional help can be useful. So seek support if constipation persists for weeks or months. And then if you're noticing frequent accidents, painful bowel movements, child avoiding eating or the bathroom, and professionals that can help is, again, a multidisciplinary team. So your pediatrician, a pediatric GI specialist, a pelvic floor therapist, a dietitian. All of these are really great to have on your team. And I also add in there maybe a functional medicine doctor too, because they'll help kind of with more of like that supplement route and some alternatives for some of the like medications, but it's such a good blend of all the providers. And then pelvic floor therapy, when we talk a little bit about like pelvic floor therapy and what we do, it can help kids learn how to relax their muscles. It can help us teach how to lengthen muscles, better toileting posture, breathing and coordination strategies. And then also to just like abdominal massage and nervous system work. There's so many different things that we can help educate on, helping you establish a good morning routine, a good nighttime routine, and kind of troubleshooting sometimes, like bringing back to, okay, this is what we saw, this is the pattern we saw, and being able to kind of guide that a little bit more. And so that's where a pelvic floor therapist can become pretty helpful. And often what you learn, especially if you have multiples, you can just apply that to your whole family, which is really helpful.
Yeah. I guess I've been surprisingly encouraged at how well these kiddos do when the parents feel confident. And so a lot of times we're doing work on these kiddos, or giving strategies, or giving ideas, or maybe alternative options too. And then coming and supporting the parents too, because
Yeah.
they a lot of times are in the trenches of this, and it can get exhausting, or they just don't know, and so to empower the parents also, or to be a second voice in what the parents have already been doing. It's really cool to see this come around then and see the successes out of some of this work that we're doing with kids. And so basically, to take away anything from this episode, we want you to know that chronic constipation is common and it's very treatable. And so many kids develop that pelvic floor muscle pattern that make pooping harder. And so really simple changes. We've offered lots of nuggets here in these last several minutes, but just these simple changes, routine, posture, breathing, stool softness, anything, the nervous system, those are all just really simple tweaks that we can make, but the payout is big. And we can really turn this around into a normal function again. And so if we let that cycle persist, then professional guidance is a huge asset to help reset the system. As always, hopefully this has helped. If you want to share all the things on our whatever platform you're listening to this, we covet your support. And
Yes.
we want to just continue to keep this conversation going.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Pelvis Project podcast. Help us continue the conversation by liking and sharing this episode with friends. And if you really want to do us a solid, leave us a review. If you'd like to follow us on social, check out the show notes for links. And remember, this week, take a deep breath and relax your pelvic floor.